And here we are with Chelsea Lee. How you doing, my friend? How you holding up?
Oh, I was better until yesterday evening, but we're, we're getting through it.
I mean, this is where it gets quite tricky, and this is where one of the interesting questions is: it comes to elite athletes, it can still train. Now, is it a
Yes.
white stripe, white belt, one stripe? Is it an elite athlete? What's an elite level jiu-jitsu player? Go on. Where do you think that line sort of gets drawn?
Well, we've defined it based on the UK BJJA's, framework. So essentially, we've set out 15. I think we have 15 athletes that we chose as like our elite group, and those are the people that we're training, and those are the people that we're training with. So we've chosen both people that we think would really benefit from an elite style training, but also people that we want to train with. So it's kind of a combination of the two things. But you know, it's technically, I don't know how you define it. Like, you can't really define it as a professional athlete because there's so few. Uh, could define it as a semi-professional athlete, but it's almost impossible. And the guidelines are so loose that
This is so
it's
ambiguous, like these titles and this, that, and this is where it gets so tricky because, again, like if you're, say, a blue belt and you're competing and earning money from that, are you not an elite athlete at that point, even though you may have been training
you'd
only
think,
2 or 2
right?
years? Whereas you can get black
Yeah,
belts who don't
it's
really train or compete that much. It's sort of, I've got it and I'm sort of, it's a hobby. So,
yeah, I don't know because I mean, technically, Tom and I both qualify as elite athletes, but that's not how I envision myself. I think of like, obviously I'm American. I think of like NFL, pro athletes that are making tons of money. That's how I think of an elite athlete, even though we qualify under all these under all these guidelines. So I don't know. I don't know. I think that jiu-jitsu was definitely not on their mind when they decided to define elite athlete under the UK guidance.
I mean, this is the double-edged sword because when everyone starts doing jiu-jitsu, like, yeah, it's the 1%. Yeah, we're cool. No one knows about us. I think, oh shit, we're not getting funded because we're the 1% and no one knows about us. It gets a bit like, because even like judo's quite ambiguous in itself. So when
And then you have
lockdown,
to explain it
this is it.
to everybody that you meet.
I mean, this is where it gets even funnier as well because again, it's the whole vegan conversation. Where you're like, oh yeah, if you guys didn't know I do jiu-jitsu, if you guys didn't know this is what I do, saying, oh, I don't know who you are. Like, oh, just in case
Yeah.
you know, just in case something kicks off, I might pull guard on you. Just I've got your back. It's all right.
It could happen. That would definitely be the way I would go, but
Uh,
I
It
don't. I don't know.
it is an important tangent. There we are from there. Last week I did a street fight. What's your opinions? Go on.
I mean, if you have grips, why not? It might confuse them. Uh, I think running is probably your best bet in a street fight. So maybe take up like couch to 5K. That's my professional advice on getting in a street fight.
From an
Uh,
elite athlete.
but definitely no lasso guard. It takes way too much time to set up. Yeah,
This is it. Get
yeah, definitely not.
your lapels and everything else. So the hierarchy of self defense is
Hierarchy of positions.
our position is basically couch to 5K, bolos, lasso guard somewhere down here. Is it further down?
Yeah,
Wrestling's
well, no,
that's not
you
real,
need
is it?
weapons in there somewhere.
Oh no, don't worry
Weapons
about it.
somewhere in there.
That's
Like
cheating. What if you just get really angry and people
a big
say,
stick.
I think it's a bit of a delay. I don't mean to interrupt you. Best to say. So let's
That's
try.
okay.
Let's
I think
try
it's
and
I
go
think
on.
it's my Wi-Fi.
I'll blame yours if not mine. It's all good. So,
Yeah,
regards to like the
yeah.
adaptation to lockdown in itself, obviously reduced numbers, very ambiguous. How did you find, like, I don't know, restructuring things in the sort of class setup? Because again, obviously, you're not sure who's even allowed to train at this point, and then the guidelines you've got and what you're gonna have to teach, even social distance in itself. How did you find that transition?
Well, when we came back to training and we started our elite training back up, it was pretty straightforward because we just started running it like a comp class. We have pods, but within our class, but that was kind of a natural thing anyway because we have obviously Tom and I are pretty small, so we have people that we train with, but there are definitely people in that class that I don't really ever train with because they just make no sense for me to train with. They're giants, you know. So the pods kind of happen naturally, and one of the benefits to choosing a set group of people was that we got to choose people who we knew would fit well together. So like I knew that I was going to have 8 guys in that class who were just going to be giants and I was never going to train with them, and that's fine. And we've got 7 that I know I train with sometimes. I've got some women that I train with, I've got some guys that I train with, and that's how we set up that class. When we came back and we brought back in a larger number of students, we started out with pods. So every student had a training partner that they trained with exclusively. And that was it. They just trained with that person. And the classes went fine like that. The biggest problem that we found was just that we were getting fatigued from teaching the same class over and over and over again, like 3 times a night, 4 times a night. And that was mentally fatiguing in a totally different way. And obviously we were teaching with masks on, and that, I know they say that they don't impede your airflow, but they definitely do. I was lightheaded and had a headache by the end of the night every night. So, we were just trying to get through it as much as possible. And now that they've locked us down, I don't know that we really have any recourse other than to go back to just that group of elite students that we chose at the beginning.
I mean, you get the people with the whole altitude mask sort of thing. Think, okay, maybe there might be something to this. And again, it must be it's so frustrating, because when you first came over to Rolling Dojo, I remember going for the opening. It's absolutely amazing facility, yeah. And then getting told like limited numbers, restricting kind of things. It's a proper what's a nice way of avoiding it? But yeah, it's just that sort of circumstantially. It's so frustrating. And again, when it comes to obviously the size really difference, the whole jiu-jitsu premise of small opponent can beat the big opponent because of technique, this, that, and the other. But also they don't take into account how uncomfortable the whole process of getting there is. Obviously injuries and just, big people just jumping on you, thinking, okay, how do you find managing that side of things? Thinking, okay, I've already proved what I need to prove at this point. Just don't roll with me. Leave me alone. Like, what's your sort of with the giants and themselves?
Yeah. I at our gym, I very rarely find that I have people that I need to kind of stay away from, because most of our guys, from the very beginning, we set up the gym with the mentality size. And if that means that you're big and you have to scale it back, then you scale it back. If that means that you're small and you need to ramp it up to match the intensity of your partner, then you need to do that. That being said, mass does matter, and taking that kind of impact over and over and over again is always going to be hard on your joints, hard on your body. I found that, like, particularly postpartum, I was still dealing with a lot of like relaxin in my joints. So I had to really be careful if I was rolling with somebody bigger, because I had all that tendency to have my joints sublux and separate. And like, I had to work back up to being able to roll with bigger people just because my joints physically couldn't take the beating. It's gotten much, much better. It was that first 6 months in that postpartum phase where I really started to see just how much of a beating your body does take, because all of a sudden my joints couldn't handle it anymore.
I mean, that gets to an interesting topic in itself, obviously, your pregnancy and training, because obviously leading up to it and then afterwards then getting back into it as well. Like, what was that? Was that quite planned out in itself, or is it sort of, okay, I'll see how we feel, so we work out as we go along with advice from other people? How did you find managing that whole, I don't know.
We didn't really plan when we were going to have the baby. It just was kind of like, well, we're going to have a baby at some point and we'll see when it happens. So, she wasn't planned in that sense. But once we found out that we were going to have a baby, I got a nutritionist on board. I got a weightlifting coach on board. I kept training. I was training jiu-jitsu up until about month 8 was when I stopped, because I was just too uncomfortable and also just too big. I was falling over and just, there was no productivity in that anymore. But I lifted all the way up pretty much until the week I went into labor and gave birth. So I found that being active throughout my pregnancy helped my recovery. I was able to get back on the mats and kind of very, very lightly moving three-ish weeks postpartum, which is not necessarily recommended, but I felt like I needed to move a little bit. I was starting to feel really like mentally cramped up. So I got back on the mats with some people that I really trusted. We started doing some flow rolling. And then because I was so active for so long and I took such little time off, and I ramped it back up very slowly, I was able to get back into some kind of training shape relatively quickly. I did my first competition when Fia was about 5 months old. I did Europeans. So I didn't perform as well as I wanted. I hadn't lost all the weight yet. So I was competing 2 weight divisions up, but I still, I just wanted to get out and see what I could do at that point. And that was both terrifying and I think gratifying in the end.
I mean, again, it's the whole sort of ring rust, so to speak. Again, you're sort of taking that time off, getting stuck back in, and not even just that. I mean, even as active as you were throughout the whole pregnancy, it's still different intensities. I take it you
Oh
took a
yeah.
bit of time off from neon belly drills. You think that wasn't, maybe the go-to sort of.
Yeah, no, that was definitely not. I think I didn't play any guard at all my entire pregnancy. I only did passing through my entire pregnancy. So I was so excited to get back down and start playing guard again. You just couldn't get me off my back for a while there. But I've kind of come off it now.
Now, with the competition, obviously the Europeans post-pregnancy, what was your mindset going into that then? Was that more a case of I just want to get on the mats and just get stuck in? Or was it this is something I still really want to achieve the actual final result? Is it more just I don't know, what did that competition mean to you at that point?
Obviously, I would have loved to have won, but like it didn't matter. I knew that at some point I was going to have to get back on the mat again, and I would have rather done it, 5 months postpartum, where I have no expectations for myself. Nobody has any expectations for me. I'm in the wrong weight division. I'm not remotely prepared, but I may as well just go and see where I'm at, and then I can come back and make changes and adapt and go forward from there. Essentially, I didn't want to end up in a position where I had been trying to quote unquote get back in shape for 6 months, a year, and then step back on the mat and find out that I wasn't as in shape as I had intended to be, or worse, that I had been ready to compete far earlier and not done it because I was afraid. Because the pressure just ramps up, obviously. The more time you take off, the more you kind of build that feeling up in your head. And I wanted to get it over with as fast as possible. That was my goal there.
I mean, this is an interesting part in itself, again, because obviously you're not only training like the physical aspects of things, but frequently competing, you train that elements of, okay, this is my reactions, this is my packed lunch for the day, this is all this kind of stuff. Like, what is your, I don't know, frequent competition like time looking like? Is it again, okay, I've got everything really regimented, everything's really calculated? Is it a case of, okay, see how I feel, manage the weight? Is it just quite a stressful situation? I don't know. Do you find competing quite a stressful process, or do you find it sort of, I don't know, just by the by like a normal day in the gym kind of thing?
I find it kind of both, honestly. I find it very stressful, but it's a stress that I'm used to at this point. So it's something that I kind of have accepted into my life, and it's part of just the routine of training and working and teaching and all that stuff. I don't feel like I could be an effective teacher without competing. At least at this point. Maybe later down the line I'll kind of be done with it. I'll have the experience that I want to have. But at this point, I feel like to be the kind of instructor that I want to be, I need to be competing. I need to be testing skills and refining skills and working towards like a larger goal. I think it really helps me be a better instructor and a better coach.
Now, this is an interesting sort of line to draw somewhere because, again, obviously, the the whole thing of who can't do teachers. I think you stop competing, so then you
Yeah.
focus on coaching. But then also is the element of while you're spending your time on the mats competing and everything else, is then the time spent away from the students. But also by being away from the competition, you stay away from the development of the game. And again, this is whole back and forth. And obviously with
Yeah,
Tom
it
as well. I
really
mean, your
is.
life must be like jiu-jitsu 24/7. Like, how do you find like taking that break and that time away from it?
Well, I think you mentioned Tom, and I think that he's a really important part of that because he's a little bit older than I am, and he's kind of in a different space competitively. He competes when he wants to. If he doesn't want to, he just doesn't. So he takes over a lot of the coaching side of things when I'm focused on something else, or when I'm focused on training to compete or whatever it is. He kind of handles that other side of things. We really, really try not to let jujitsu be our entire life. We really, really make every effort for it not to be, because you kind of lose the love for it if it becomes everything. And if it becomes your only topic of conversation, if it becomes the only thing you ever are doing, I think you really do start to lose the passion and the drive for it. So we spend a lot of time doing other things, going on hikes, going to different places around the country. Back when we were traveling for seminars a lot, we would regularly make time to stop at National Trust sites, for instance. I think we're the youngest people to ever go to half of these National Trust sites. And he's put me on a strict limit of one castle a day. I'm not allowed more than one castle a day. But but I think it's really important to do stuff like that takes you outside of this sphere and reminds you just how small the jiu-jitsu world is, because it really is. It's tiny, and it's very insular, and there's such a big world out there that it's really important to experience as well.
The castle cut is harsh, only the one.
It is. I'm allowed one castle and one cathedral, and that's it. There's no 2 cathedrals a day anymore. I've been banned from it.
Oh no, there's a lockdown.
And
What's that?
It had nothing to do with lockdown. It was because I dragged him around Portugal once, and he was just done with it after that. Yeah.
I mean, this is it. What about monasteries and churches? Are they included still, or is it more like a lump sum, like 3 churches to a monastery, or what?
I mean, luckily for him, that monasteries are kind of spread far apart, so it's hard to get to 2 in a day. But cathedrals, they're on top of each other often, so you can get to 3 or 4 of them if you want to.
With attitude, you can definitely.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, this is always an interesting one in itself. I would say that divide's so important, as you said there, which is a huge, huge point. That as much as we love jiu-jitsu, it's definitely a lot of people's world. The world is bigger than that. The world is bigger than that. The gym.
It's so much bigger. It's so much bigger. And there's so many things to see and do. And he and I are so fortunate that we have gotten to travel around so much, and we get to go, to Ireland, to Scotland, to all over Europe, and we get to see all these cool places. And the last thing I want to do is only see the airport and the inside of a gym. That's not how I want to live my life. And I know that's not how he wants to live his life either. So,
I mean, that's so important, having that balance and understanding, because again, you get people both sides of the sort of spectrum that, it's either all training or no training. Whereas having the happy medium, okay, we'll train if we want to, but we'll work it out. If not, I'm sure we'll find some way to train at some point if we find, that if you're that way inclined. Now, when it comes to obviously your camp and everything else, and obviously you putting your own pressure on yourself and all this kind of stuff. I mean, do you have a camp as such for a competition, or is it just like the Chow Sun thing at, camps for kids and you train all the time kind of thing?
I do train all the time, but I do think that there's value in kind of scaling your intensity. So the way I always kind of envisioned it from my experiences at AOJ and at Atos was that you should always be ready to kind of go into a local level competition. So if for instance, a competition popped up this weekend, I know that I should always be ready to go in and at least put up a good fight at featherweight black belt adult. And, I should be ready to go at that weight, at that age, at that time frame. But then for those bigger competitions, Worlds, Pan Ams, Europeans, all those more significant ones, there's value in, cutting weight, in ramping up your training, in doing cyclical training, in doing more strength training, in doing more aerobic training to get ready for those bigger competitions. So that's kind of how I think about it. There's competitions that don't matter so much, that you have to look at as practice and something that you just kind of do to keep your skills sharp. And then there are competitions that matter, that you put in more work for.
I mean, that's always interesting, and always sort of staying ready. Haven't got to get ready in that sense, but also that scaling up. Now, again, regards to the habits and the way the comp classes vary, obviously at AOJ and again at Atos. And I remember you were saying, when I met you a while ago, I think Rolling Dojo, you were saying about Atos, and there's a lot bigger guys, whereas AOJ is a lot smaller people. So it's a lot more, I don't know, do you find it's a lot more strength conditioning focused than it is jiu-jitsu focused? Is it more technique and just drills? What do you find is the real difference in that, sort of in their camps as such?
Are you talking specifically about the competition classes?
Okay, that's an interesting one. Is it all classes the same kind of intensity as such?
No, definitely not.
I was going to say the beginners white belts just going like.
No, definitely not. So I think in terms of obviously AOJ and Atos have split at this point, and I haven't been to either for quite some time, but I can only talk about my experiences back when I was training there. when I was training at Altos, the guys did get like trend quite large for a while, and I think they've kind of scaled back now, and you've got kind of a good mix at this point, and you've got a lot more women training there as well, which is something I really would have liked when I was training there. But the competition classes that they had at both were very, very similar. You know, they don't do a lot of technique. You do some drills, but mostly it's a lot of sparring. It's a lot of live training. It's a lot of positional training. There's a lot of pressure testing of technique and skill and mindset in those classes. There, you get your technique from fundamentals classes or from, you know, some of the classes that the, I want to say the general population, but like, you know, your average blue belt comes into in the evenings, and that's where you learn your technique. That's where you do your drilling. Those competition classes are always high impact and high intensity.
They look horrible from obviously on flow grappling anyway. Now, in that sense, then obviously the pressure testing. How do you try new techniques in your own way of doing things? Obviously, we're saying it the nicest way possible in the sense of, okay, you get a new either guard or a new thing you've seen on Instagram. Why not for modern sort of sake? You know, for the younger listeners, here we are. Like, is it a case, okay, you get the brand new white belt, say, I see if it works on you, then the blue belt, and so on and so forth, or is it like just, okay, let's see if we make it work, and then just work out as we go along?
Yeah, there are definitely people that I test technique on. I won't pretend that there aren't people that I test things out on. I like to test things out on women, like lower belt women, because I know that they're going to react more similarly to people who are in my division are going to react. And then once I try it out for the first couple of times, then I just throw it in and I try it on anybody. But I want to make sure, my biggest concern when I'm training is to make sure that I'm not going to get injured. So I want to try new things on somebody who I know that I can control no matter what happens. So I know that a lot of my female training partners are my size or slightly larger. So I know that no matter what happens, I can control their weight. I can control whatever they do. So I'm not concerned about them falling on me or, you know, kneeing me, or, you know, it's just a knee to the head if somebody, you know, 60 kilos knees me in the head. But if it's somebody 75 kilos and they knee me in the head, that's a completely different story. And then I'm walking around with a concussion for a week, and nobody likes that.
Yeah, the bright lights aren't so much fun with that kind of thing. I mean, it's more in the
No,
sense of like,
not at all.
okay, so again, there's more on the sort of topic of pressure testing there, because again, when you're competing so often with this sort of, you know, kill or be killed mentality, it's then where are the windows for development of, I don't know, newer things and such. So regards of your development from, I don't know, the word go to where we are now, is a bit more a case about like cherry picking certain techniques and putting them together after the fact? Or is it, okay, I've got 2 or 3 staple techniques I absolutely love, I'm going to drill these out and absolutely milk this to the highest degree and then gradually build if I need to, but that kind of thing. So I mean, a bit more, is it varied, or is it more stick to what you've what works and keep building on that?
I think there are definitely techniques that I or areas, I think, where I know I'm comfortable. I know no matter what I do, if I can get back to a certain position, that I'm gonna pretty much be able to hold the person for long enough to get control of the match. But as far as like adding new things on, I think once you get past a certain point, adding new things on is very different than it is when you're a white or a blue belt, because most stuff is familiar in some way. Like for instance, when during the first lockdown, Tom and I subscribed to Keenan's Worm Guard app. So we bought the Worm Guard app and we started playing around with all his lapels. You there?
Yeah, the think I
Sorry,
heard
I lost the internet.
I heard lapel, and then it sort of,
Okay.
I was very suspensefully gone.
So I we got this his lapel encyclopedia app or whatever it was, and we started playing with Squid Guard. And I realized that Squid Guard is essentially just the same as playing Spider Guard with the ankle grip and the sleeve grip. It's exactly the same guard, except you're wrapped up in a lapel. So you start to realize that you might change grips, you might change foot placements, but the theory is all the same. So all you're doing is kind of expanding knowledge out rather than adding new things in. And that's very different than like all of a sudden you've learned that you can wrap somebody in a lapel. And that's a totally new world than learning that, okay, I can wrap somebody in a lapel, and this is just the same game that I play in with a spider guard and pant grip. So I think that the type of learning changes as you get better and better.
Now that in itself is an interesting way, like the way you're learning then. So is it more a case of trying to keep it down? Because people say about shapes sort of thing, okay, you don't see like Kimuras, for example, you see a shape, you see like a crooked arm, or you see a neck out, okay, it's a guillotine, that kind of thing. Is that how you like to learn in itself, like break it down to proper like Occam's razor sort of simplest sort of forms in the smallest amount of complexities? Or is it more you like the very long-winded, like 10th Planet-esque names for things? What's your sort of preference on that side of things?
No, I think simpler is better. Especially from a teaching perspective. We teach a lot of kids, and I think teaching the kids has really helped me drill down into what makes jiu-jitsu work and like what makes positions work. And I only ever want to teach those kids things that are actually going to be useful to them. And I only ever want to teach our students things that are actually going to be useful to them. And I think if you tell somebody that they need to find a way to, for instance, hold their partner flat on their back in side control, that's going to be a more useful concept to them in the long run than saying you always have to have a crossface, you always have to have an underhook, you always have to do this, you always have to do that. The goal is to hold your partner flat. You need to find a way that's going to be effective. I can tell you how I do it. Tom can tell you how he does it, and it's different. You know, Andre Galvao can tell you how he does it, and it's different. But the goal is the same, and you need to find a way to do it. That's pretty much how we operate and how we teach.
Yeah, I think Tom DeBlas has a thing. It's like, I think bottom half guide, so don't let them kiss you, and that's like how you can keep them, like keep your frames in this kind of thing. So sort of concepts in the set. Yeah, I like that. And when it comes to teaching, obviously you get mixed levels and everything else. Like how divided are your classes regards to ability wise? Is it white and black belts in the same class, or is it just like, you know, beginners and advanced? Would you like to mix them in? What's your sort of setup with that?
Well, we have a dedicated beginners. Yeah, obviously, right? We have a dedicated beginners program. And we run that for 16 weeks. So you go in, and it's a cyclical program, so you can drop in anywhere in the 16 weeks, and you'll run through 16 weeks. And at the end of 16 weeks, you're pretty much ready to get your first stripe. That's about 4 months, give or take, unless you miss some lessons here or there. So it covers pretty much everything from what is guard to what is guard passing, to how to pull guard, how to do basic takedowns, what to do in close guard, basics from all these different positions. And the goal of the program is just to get people out of the door and into our fundamentals classes with a basic idea of where they're trying to go in jiu-jitsu. So the hardest thing to learn for people is often like, where am I going from this position? I can teach anybody a squid guard sweep, but it doesn't matter if they don't have any context for it. So we throw everybody into the same level classes after beginner. We have beginners, we have fundamentals classes, which is our technique classes, and then we have competition classes, and those are our classes that are focused on strength, endurance, conditioning, explosivity, all those kinds of things. But those beginners, they're the ones that we really try and focus on building good habits, because when we get people in who have been training elsewhere, they often have bad habits that we have to spend a lot of time unpicking. So we set up that dedicated beginners program with that in mind, that we want to build beginners that kind of bypass all those bad habits that are so easy to fall into.
So what sort of bad habits do you often sort of find then? What's like the common sort of things you'll see from other gyms?
I think the biggest ones that we see, and we see these when we travel around, we see them all the time, is people being on their knees to pass. So you're never mobile on your knees, and being on your knees is never going to give you the same amount of pressure as being in a bear crawl or being on your feet. So being on your knees to pass, you're not fast enough, you're not heavy enough. And it's just, you can improve your passing almost by 100% if you just get off your knees. So that's the easiest and the simplest thing that we see all the time. And the other thing is that in guard, people have a tendency to hug their partner close to them rather than keeping their feet on them and keeping distance. And I think those are the two biggest things we see. And just by fixing those two habits, by never giving people an option to pass on their knees and never giving them an option to hug their partner in half guard, you can save them years of frustration and years of problems. That's what we really focus on with our beginners.
I mean, this is where things get quite interesting, because again, we were talking earlier about the ambiguity of like some sort of things in themselves. Obviously, jiu-jitsu can be quite ambiguous in the sense of like guidelines, what's definitively right or wrong in certain things. Obviously, very circumstantial.
Yeah,
and obviously the way to teach, the way to build people up. Do you feel it's quite important to build a solid framework just for a template? Do you feel it should build like, okay, this should be your game from white until purple, then onwards, have fun, see you later, work it out? What's your sort of area between, okay, we're building your carbon copy of us, to, okay, this is you doing your own thing, working it out? Where's your sort of line between there as such?
So we have like this, we've built this, all of our curriculums around this idea that no matter what you're doing, it should work on everybody. So if I'm doing a technique, I should be able to pretty much pull it off on anyone from the first day in jiu-jitsu to, black belt, world-class black belts. Tom and I are pretty small, so we do have I don't want to say an advantage, but we have this frame of reference that a lot of bigger jiu-jitsu athletes don't have, where we know that if like a technique doesn't work, there's no muscling through it, there's no faking it. I can't overpower most of the people that I train with. There's just no way I'm going to do that. So everything I do has to actually work. It has to be a real thing. And all the timing that I have, it has to be good, because there's no wiggle room. If I make a mistake, I'm going to get squished. And I'm pretty good at jiu-jitsu, but if I end up on the bottom of side control against a 70, 75, 80 kilo blue belt, they're going to give me a hard time. So I don't want to go there. I don't want to give them even half an opportunity to get there. So we just operate under that mentality. Like, yeah, you might be 100 kilos, but there's somebody out there who's 110. They're going to be bigger than you. There's somebody out there who's going to be bigger than you. There's somebody out there who's going to be stronger than you, who's going to be faster than you. So everything you do has to work under its own merit, not because of an attribute that you have. And then we let people kind of expand from there.
I mean, that is definitely so important. Again, that sort of, we were saying earlier about toning things down when it comes to the sparring, make sure the bigger guys are, try not to use too much strength. It's want people to sort of up it a bit more to try and even the playing field in that sense. And again, it's very important to remember that. But yeah, I'm the strongest person in there. I'm all right. I can get away with this. But someone else in your weight division on the day who's about the same, have fun trying that again. Now,
it's different. It's different.
Now with
sorry,
did I still? As to say, when it comes to, the question was more specifically around sort of technique you're teaching, the way you can apply it in sparring. Obviously, you're learning certain sequences, certain things, and that side of things. So again, is it a case of, say you have your technique for the class, and then individuals, say, I don't know, like myself, who's quite lanky, you'd advise in a certain way of applying it? Or is it a case of, okay, do what works for you in sparring and sort of troubleshoot? How do you sort of find that area of, I don't know, personal input on it?
I think that there's definitely times where we adjust techniques for different body sizes, or even flexibility levels, or injuries. So for instance, I was teaching a knee slide the other day, and we had to adjust how the student was knee sliding because he has a bad knee on one side. So the angle of the knee slide had to slightly change. So we do that all the time, because we have to recognize what the goal of the technique is. So for instance, with the knee slide, the goal is to eliminate that space for the bottom knee to come back inside, and for the the top knee to come back in and form the knee shield. Injury, he couldn't slide his knee like I do or like Tom does. We had to change it to make sure that no matter what he did, that that bottom knee couldn't come back inside. And that's really, really common. You see that with inversions, you see that with all kinds of things where people just don't have the flexibility, or they have an old injury, or they're too tall, or they're too short, or whatever it is. And you just have to kind of deal with that as an instructor. People always have a reason why they can't do something, but often they can. They just need a little bit of an adjustment, a little bit of guidance. You know, the one you hear all the time from beginners is, I can't cross my feet in close guard. No, you can. You just have to pull them a little bit closer to you. You can, I promise you can.
No, the best is when you get slightly larger people and they can't quite close up a triangle properly. Thinking, yeah, but when you get that closed up, it's gonna be on straight away. Like this thing with being lanky, you get a triangle, there's so much space, but like you get like the short stocky legs, and there's no wiggle room in that.
I feel that. I have a hard time locking triangles, but when they're on, they are definitely on.
Yeah, you know about it. Now, this is a thing in itself. So when it comes to your students competing, how nervous are you for that versus yourself? Like, what's the transition like there? Because again, it's normally fighters, it's a similar sort of conversation.
I honestly, it doesn't bother me when my students compete. I think because I just see all the competitions that they do as a really good learning experience for them. I think the only time I'm ever disappointed in students is if they kind of behave badly at competitions, and it honestly never really happens if they are sore losers. And I'm particularly talking about the kids. We have a lot of conversations with the kids before they go and they compete about, good sportsmanship and being a graceful winner and a graceful loser and all that kind of stuff, because I think it's really important. And I don't know, I see it a lot in the UK where that kind of like kill or be killed mentality has seeped into jiu-jitsu. It's different here a little bit than it is in the US, where you get that a little bit, but not nearly to the same extent that you see here. And I'm not sure why that is. I think maybe just jiu-jitsu is a little bit younger here and the culture hasn't matured at all. But with the kids particularly, I get a little nervous for the younger ones because they're obviously not as emotionally mature, and losing seems like a huge deal to them. But we talk a lot about like why we compete and what we're trying to accomplish when we compete, and how we can get better if we do lose, and that kind of thing. With the adults, I figure they're adults. They need to manage their own emotions for the most part. They get nervous, and I get a little bit nervous for them if when they're nervous, more so than if they're not nervous, because I know that nerves can play a huge role in how you perform, and everybody wants their students to perform well. But for me, it doesn't really bother me so much, the winning and losing. Our gym is still very young as well. So for me, every competition that they get in is just a way for them to get better. Most of them haven't been competing very long at all. So
I mean, a lot where that question sort of came from, more the sense of, okay, again, the gym not being that old so far, again, you've built this emotional investment in these students, you're building them up and seeing them not fly the nest as such, but you mum ahead and sort of thinking, okay, they're about to compete, I want them to do well, and if they don't, that's sort of, again, you obviously know that competition, sort of it happens, you see the day or it's not, but, you sort of can't help it. But again, it's interesting, again, the fundamentals for the beginners and the kids, that sort of understanding that it's okay if it doesn't work out. And I feel that kill or be killed thing, again, I feel, because obviously wrestling is such a huge thing in the States, that element of competition, that frequency, you sort of, if you were that angry every single weekend of competing, I think you'd be very tired by the end of it.
Yeah. I think you might be right on that. Like, there is just a little bit of a different vibe at competitions in the US than there are here. And I think it's changing, slowly as the sport matures and as more people start to kind of join, and, more kids start to join, as families start to become more of a thing in the sport. the testosterone kind of gets dialed back a little bit. But I think with the worst ones that I've seen are actually like coaches that are riling up their teenage students. That just doesn't sit well with me. You can go out and you can win a tournament without ever like yelling or screaming or swearing or telling your kid to kill another kid or any of that. You can go out and you can do well and you can win gracefully without ever putting another kid through that experience. It's just jujitsu at the end of the day. It's a sport. It's like football. The kids are going to go out and they're going to fight each other, and then they're going to go home and have some ice cream. It's a sport. It's for fun. It's nothing that's going to be live or die,
The ice cream's essential. Everyone knows that. That's the rules.
It is. I think our kids always go and get Burger King afterwards, actually.
Wonderful. That's a very interesting point then. So your post-competition food, professional elite athlete, Chelsea Lee, what is post-competition food for you?
I always end up eating gummy bears. I'm always just like immensely craving gummy bears after competition.
So niche.
especially if I've cut any weight. Tom knows to just stock up. Dude just brings me bags full. And then I end up, because I've been cutting weight, I can only eat like a handful and then I'm done. So it's just like a sad gummy bear feast.
A sad, nauseous gummy bear feast. Excess gummy bears just stuck in your car or something.
Yeah.
Oh, wonderful. That sounds...
Exactly.
Oh, I can imagine.
It's terrible.
I don't know where to go from there. That's quite a change in itself. Now, when it comes to the coaching side of it as well, you get the sort of, I don't know, you get people getting overly invested. They're sort of effing and jeffing this, that, and the other. When it comes to coaching from your point of view, being more methodical and understanding it, what is your approach to obviously different levels? Is it more a macro level of saying get on top, make sure you keep position? Is it more specifics like inch by inch details when they're in certain positions? Or what's your usual kind of approach when it comes to cornering in inverted commas? Because again, you're at the sideline shouting your lungs out. But
yeah, I think it really, really depends on the student. It's a very, very individualized thing. And I think that you have to really, really know the person that you're coaching or cornering or whatever it is quite well. Some people really respond well to just being screamed at and being told that they're being lazy and they need to get on top and they need to stay on top and that they need to just stop messing around and just do what I'm saying. And, some people really respond well to that. And other people need the, okay, you need to take your right hand, you need to grab the lapel with your right hand. Okay, now you've got the lapel, good job. Now you need to do and they respond better to that kind of step by step by step. Some people don't need any of that, and they just need, you've got 3 minutes left. Good job. You're doing great. That's fine. Get on top. You're doing fine. Good job. And some people, they don't really need anything except you to be there, like physically be there so they can see you in the crowd. So I think that's almost impossible to say. And I think that's why you need to know your students so well, because I know that there are some students, if I talk to them, like in that first example, they would burst into tears on the mat, and that would be counterproductive entirely. But then there are some students I know who would just become complacent if I told them they were doing fine and they just had to, keep going. They'd just lay there and then they'd get the guard pass and then they'd be in mount and they'd be freaking out. And, they need that harder coaching side. And I think the only way to do that is to know your students as well as you possibly can.
I mean, this is the nature of these kind of questions. Because again, as much as they're asked in the sense of yes or no, it's more in the sense of, okay, if it starts with it depends, I know it's going to be a good answer, because again, it's that more thought out, more sort of experience kind of thing in itself. And again, it is important. And when it comes to competition preparation, what is your comp class looking like for you guys? Obviously, like any trade secrets as such. Is it very position orientated? Because again, it's always like you get certain gyms where it's like, okay, you got your 2 points down, make sure you win the round. Is it general positional stuff? Is it just frequency, intensity? What's the usual sort of take homes from your sort of sessions you like to impose as such?
Well, Tom and I like to kind of pick a theme for a week or 2 weeks or sometimes even a month. So like and those themes can vary really, really widely. So like, for instance, a couple of weeks ago, we were working on just not being swept. So all of our drills were kind of centered around, as soon as your butt hits the ground, you have to bounce back up and stay on top. And, all of our drills were kind of centered around that. Partner takes you down, you have to scramble back to your feet. And then if you lose, you get press ups or whatever it is. But we have other times where we're focused on just learning how to fight long matches. So we'll do 10-minute rounds, or 5-10-minute rounds, or, long rounds. Sometimes we're working on explosive training. So you get a lot of really, really short rounds from different positions. So what we're really always looking at is what's going wrong in these classes. That's a theme for our students. So for instance, our students are just getting their guards passed every time they pull. So for a couple of weeks, we're just going to work on doing a lot of guard pulling, a lot of trying to pass right off the guard pull so that they're pulling guard properly rather than being lazy about it, that kind of thing. And it's not so much that we have a long-term plan with it, but we look at it a couple of weeks out in the future. So these are the areas that they need to work on. What's the most logical way to approach them? So for instance, all of our guys are having a really hard time with their guard pulls. So we start working on guard pulls, and then we add in one person trying to take the other person down and the other person trying to pull guard. And then from there, we kind of build on it so that at first we're focused on such a tiny, tiny skill that they can succeed. I read an article, and I can find it for you, but essentially somebody has to succeed 80% of the time for maximal learning. So whatever you're doing, you should succeed at it 80% of the time and fail, 20 or 15% of the time. And that's the sweet spot. If you're failing more than that, you're not learning optimally. And if you're succeeding more than that, you're not being tested properly. So you're not learning optimally. So we want to find a way to get people succeeding that 80% of the time, and then you expand out the drill so that now they're failing 70% of the time. Once they start succeeding 80% of the time, you expand out the drill. And that's pretty much how we build all of our drills, whether it's fundamentals class or comp class or anything. And then on top of it, we add in tons of sparring into the lesson. And sometimes we're focused on short rounds. Sometimes we do long rounds. Sometimes we do a mix. Sometimes we do a pyramid of training. So like 5-minute rounds, 4-minute rounds, and so on down the line, just to mix it up and get people doing different things so they're not getting bored.
There's a lot in that I like a lot. And a huge thing in that is the sort of, you're being aware of certain habits. Like prime example, say you're allowing yourself being swept. It's more, okay, we need to sort that out. We need that sort of urgency, that more, yes, it's jiu-jitsu, but it's still points being scored against you. You're not getting ground and pounded, but you need to get back up. And again, enforcing these kind of principles. And again, the different ways of doing it. And I like the way, I think it's not quite Pareto's law, I don't think, because that's 80-20 as a general principle. I'm not sure if that's more specific to a different sort of concept. But again, that idea that try not to overly, I don't know, push too many things that aren't working, or let things that are working go too easy about resistance. I mean, it's a nice little way of enforcing that. And it's good the fact you're being that attentive to what's going on, because again, you get some of the coaches sort of sit in their phone and they sort of ignore what's going on. But no, it's good the fact you guys are so engaged with the sort of themes and the sort of students in itself. Let's take a quick interval to sort of...
Yeah, I mean, it's really...
What's you saying?
Sorry?
So I'll take a quick interval just to shout to our sponsors.
I've lost the...
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Cool. Just going to shout out our sponsors: the English Hypnotist, Rieco Clothing, and the People's IT. More about those in the description. The English Hypnotist is he helps with the mental side of things. He's very good for sort of sports psychology, and got a business sort of way mindset. Again, like people suffer sort of self-sabotage kind of thing. Really good for that. Rieco Clothing, really high quality clothes, really nice designs, and People's IT helping you get set up with all your website needs. Yeah, I think those were words. Bit of delay, but here we are. Something like that, sort of not quite the commercial sort of standard, but we'll get there. It's a work in progress. Now, when it comes to your own assessment of your own performance and everything else, are you quite good at analysing? Do you watch a lot of footage of yourself? Is it just Tom telling you after, so we need to have a chat when we get home? What's the usual sort of thing for your analysis?
I think I'm pretty terrible at it. I think I don't know that anybody does a very good job of analyzing what's going on with themselves. It's easier if you do watch video. It's much easier if you watch video, obviously, because you can see it from a different perspective. But I think, you know, I try to be as realistic as possible about what's going on in training and all that kind of stuff. But I'm a cynic and I'm a pessimist, and I'm hard on myself, and I expect a lot of myself. So I know that I'm not very good at analyzing how I'm training. It's good to have Tom, you know, around, because he's he's also very observant, and he's very good at telling me what's going on, where we're going wrong, and that kind of stuff. But honestly, we try not to coach each other too much, because it's not very conducive to a relationship to coach each other. We butt heads a lot about coaching each other, so it's definitely not great for maintaining a long-term relationship. Uh, I It's much easier to coach each other in an actual competition, but if it comes to like classes, uh, neither of us respond very well to it. So we tend to not. We definitely let our students do it. We let our students coach us. We let our students coach each other. We encourage them to coach each other and to coach us, and to tell us, you know, tell us off if we're doing things that we tell them not to do. We don't. We tend to not want to build an environment where students have us on a pedestal. Um, we want to have an environment that where obviously we have a lot of knowledge to impart, but I think you can learn from anybody. And I think that I have a lot that I can learn from my students, and I think that they have value to give to me. And they can, you know, they can see things from an outside perspective that I can't necessarily see if they're watching me train, you know. And I think that a lot of coaches kind of cut themselves off from a really valuable form of input by not allowing their students that kind of interaction with them. But that's just, you know, that's the environment that we wanted to build. So that's what we did. I appreciate from many of the environments that I've been in before.
I mean, in that self, there's quite a lot more questions to ask. I mean, off the bat, I mean, it's really healthy having those relationships with you and Tom, and obviously you and your students, to sort of have that kind of, okay, we know what's okay, we know what's not. We're not having this chat. It's okay. We set this story up pretty clear. And with students, it's really healthy to get having that sort of, don't put us on a pedestal, but you know, we've still got our place of understanding what we've been through, what we're able to sort of teach. And again, it's interesting having that sort of non-biased lens of, okay, I know this isn't right, I know this is wrong, but again, they don't have your default like prejudices and preferences.
Yeah,
So again, it's completely open
exactly.
sort of set of eyes. Now, regards to the environments you've trained in before, obviously Atos and AOJ was quite some time ago, but more in the sense of,
Yeah.
do those sort of replicate those kind of values in the same kind of way, or is it more something you've come up with out of your own preferences from how you've been in other environments? Where's this sort of attitude come from?
I think I think AOJ had much more of that than Atos did back when I was training there. Um, but there was still very, very much a separation between instructors and students. I think that it's more a function of Tom and my personality than it is of an experience that we've had elsewhere. Um, when we started our gym, what we wanted to do was take the best of all the different places that we've trained and all the different instructors that we've had, because we have had such a varied experience. Tom got his black belt from Braulio Estima, so he's kind of come from that side of things, and I got mine from Andre Galvao, and then I trained with Rafa and Guy Mendez, and you know, we've both had such varied experiences that we wanted to take all the good things that came from each of those places and put it into our place. And when we started the gym, it was there was a lot going on with like you know, instructors kind of building little mini cults, and we didn't want that. But that wasn't the kind of environment that we wanted to build. So we really tried to steer as far away from that side of things as possible. Like, I don't want my students to look at me as like some kind of infallible source. I want them to learn from as many people as they can. I want them to train with as many people as they can. If they want to go somewhere else and they want to train with somebody else and then come back and tell me what they've learned, I want them to do that. I don't see my students as my property. They're not like, just because I've invested time in them doesn't make them mine. I want them to want to stay. And that's why we've set up our gym the way we have, because we want people to want to stay with us, not to be afraid to go. That makes sense.
Oh, 100%. And there's a huge distinction between the two, and not a lot of people really appreciate that. And again, you can sort of see it from both sides, sort of the insecurity, sort of, you're my students, we invested all this journey together, now you're going to leave me, how could you, sort of like a bitter ex-girlfriend kind of thing. It's heartbroken.
It's very real.
Yeah. And you get these sort of things, and again, it's kind of, it's good the fact you're managing to embody the things you value in that kind of sense. And now talk to me about Escapology then. So is this something that's always been an ongoing project then? Is this something started when you had Dojo space? What's this sort of come from?
Well, when Tom and I decided to get married and we decided we were going to move to the UK, we always had the intention of opening a gym in Cambridge. We kind of ran across this gym that somebody else had set up and we bought it. It was very kind of spur of the moment, random good luck, whatever you want to call it. It was good timing. So we had set up this affiliation between the two of us before we had found this gym. We knew that we couldn't be Atos because AOJ and Atos weren't separate at that point. We couldn't be Atos. We couldn't be Gracie Baja because that just is, we've got some
we're not touching
some
that.
drama there.
We're not touching
drama potential there. So we knew we weren't going to affiliate with either of the two teams because the other team would be very upset. So we figured the only thing to do was to form our own kind of team, and that's where Escapology came from. And then from there, we found this gym, we bought into it, we're now primary owners of it, and we're transitioning it over to being the Escapology headquarters. We have affiliates all around, Ireland, UK, Scotland, England, they're just kind of dotted around. So we've started an affiliation of kind of like-minded gyms that want to build a good training environment, and that's their focus. And it's been, up until all this happened, it was really going quite well, and we were traveling around to those different affiliates quite regularly and seeing those people and helping them out, helping them build their gyms and build their own little communities. And it's been hard to not be able to do that and see those people, but hopefully this will all be over relatively soon and we'll be able to go back to that.
It all be a dream at the end of that. I mean, it's interesting the fact of starting your own sort of thing in itself. It kind of makes sense because, again, it's not just you and Tom teaching the classes. You're getting this whole curriculum. You're getting your preferences, the way you want to run it, where you want to, approach the whole process. Because, again, this is kind of the point. Whereas if you were just sort of rinse and repeat either AOJ or Gracie Baja, however it is, you might as well have just stuck on those geese. But in the sense of you're making it your own input and expanding that bit further, it would make sense to have your own, I'll say brand, for lack of a better choice of words, but again, your own identity is how you want to sort of build and represent. Shazali, thank you so much for your time. Is there anyone you want to sort of shout regarding business pages? Where can people find yourself and Tom and Escapology?
You can find our online content at escapologybjj.com. You can find once all this is over, you can come and visit us at Rolling Dojo, and you can find us on Facebook or at rollingdojo.co.uk. I'm on Instagram at Chelsea__Lee, Leah. And we have Instagram accounts for all of our various online activities as well. And you can see Tom at the next Polaris if they don't cancel it. But we'll see about that.
Do you have Instagram for the castles?
He's going to do his commentary. I haven't been to a castle in months. Months.
No. It's awful.
I know.
We're going
to have to go to 3 or 4 in a day. We're going to have to go to 3 or 4 in a day when it's all over.
I'm not telling Tom he can do it for me. It's all good. Awesome. Thank you again for your time.